Hwang, representing the 28th District. We are here to discuss Senate Bill 185. It is a clarification of the definition of group homes under Section 8-3E of the Connecticut General Statute. I know I'm throwing a lot of letters and statutory definitions to you, but what I'm hopeful to share with you through the participants back behind me is the real impact on communities, on protected groups, and the definition of group homes in our community. So without any further delay, I want to introduce to you Representative Laura Devlin, which represents a portion of Fairfield and Trumbull, and recently elected Representative Brian Farnen. They're here in support, and then afterwards we will have the community members that are impacted by the interpretation or the current interpretation without the clarification of Statute 8-3E. So Representative Devlin, if I may.
Thank you very much, Senator, and thank you to everybody who are here. There's been some misrepresentation of Senate Bill 185 to characterize it as something that is a measure to limit opportunities for people in protected classes to live and exist within our communities. And it is actually trying to do the opposite and protect the protections that have been granted for group homes. We will be testifying, I will be testifying this morning in the Housing Committee, and I look forward to any comments or questions after, but I think more important than hearing from me, I'd like to introduce to you the neighbors who are here to speak to this issue. And first, Megan McCloat.
Hi everyone, thanks so much. My name is Megan McCloat. I am a Fairfield resident, and I am also president of the organization Neighbors for Neighborhood Preservation. I'm very honored to be able to clarify a lot of doubt around this specific issue because I think there's a lot of misinformation going around. I want to start by saying very clearly there is no doubt and no denial among our residential group that there has ever been a more important time to get substance abuse treatment right. The time is now, we are aware of it, and we are entirely sympathetic to that. Quality delivery of mental health care and treatment is imperative to the health outcomes of the patients whose lives literally depend on the prudence and rational decision-making of those who manage these residential treatment centers. I want to address something right at the outset that there's been much discussion in the press regarding specific neighborhood groups and neighborhood members in Fairfield not understanding the group home definition that private facilities are utilizing in order to circumvent local zoning regulations. The press even goes as far as to say that members of our group are ignorant to the federal law protections afforded to group homes. People have used the term NIMBY, not in my backyard. There's also another definition of NIMBY, and it's now I must become involved. I'd like to address that invalid assumption directly. There is absolutely no mistake in our understanding of federal law pertaining to group home protections afforded by the protections of the Fair Housing Authority and the Group Home American Disabilities Act. When it comes to private commercial activity of operating a for-profit, lucrative substance abuse treatment facility that refuses to accept in-network insurance benefits or state Husky aid, I have yet to identify a single federal regulation that protects commercial activity to the tune of millions of dollars of revenue that it's worthy of protected treatment of a protected class. It's important to note that even without the changed language in the legislation of 8-3E, these commercial facilities are already operating in violation of those protections as they are not accepting funds from DEMIS. To clarify, what may seem like a very complicated issue can be boiled down very simply. Group homes protect the residential livelihoods of protected class members. They rely on those protections to be free from discrimination in accessing a safe place to live in a house. That simply cannot be intended to extend to commercial activity in a residential zone to provide high-cost, low-quality health care, refusing to be regulated by state funding programs. Operating a lucrative rehab center is not the same as protecting where residents of a protected class live. I want to make it very clear that we are very much aware of the epidemic of opioid abuse in our state, in our local community, and in our country. This is not a NIMBY issue. This is protecting the intention of group homes where people live compared to a transit program that has a target aim of discharging patients less than 90 days to return to their out-of-state residences. That is not the same protected class that legislators intended when they enacted group home legislation. There are many individuals with intellectual disabilities, chronically ill physical impairments that rely on those protections. They rely on the federal law. This is dramatically impacting their ability to have a long place term to live. If anyone has any further questions, we'd be happy to clarify.
I think Representative Farnen wants to say something.
Brian Farnen, State Representative in Fairfield. I just want to make it very clear that everyone understands that we value group homes. I would venture to guess that everyone in this room has been impacted by, with a family member or a friend of mental illness or addiction. And if we wrongly expand the definition of group homes to include these for-profit transitional treatment facilities, we weaken group homes. So we want to protect group homes. I just wanted to add that. I feel like that's very important.
Thank you, Representative Farnham. And that is a perfect segue to the next speaker, because under this statute, as organizations, medical treatment facilities, take applications out and fill the ratio requirements of each community, there is the strong possibility that it could preclude real group homes in which independent living is espoused for protected groups. And this is one of the stories that we wanted to share from a resident in our community, that possibly if this is allowed to continue, it would really crowd out and exclude necessary group homes for independent living. So I have Tom McManus, who will talk about that perspective, but also share a letter of a resident in Greenfield Hill that articulates that exact possibility. Right, Tom?
Yes.
Tom McManus.
Good morning, everyone. Many neighbors in our community have loved ones with a disability or have dedicated their life's work to serving the disabled. We are keenly aware of the importance for empathy and care for the disabled. You're about to hear from a member of our community whose son has autism spectrum disorder and who would be directly impacted by Newport Academy and other similar operators opening MHRLCs. Group home protections for her son would not be possible at the home he lives in if MHRLCs are allowed to operate under a group home designation. This facility and its accusations of NIMBY behavior are insulting and proof they are out of touch with our community. This operator and their private equity backer plan to bring Wall Street beyond Main Street. They want to bring Wall Street to residential communities. I'm about to read the letter that was provided by this family. My wife and I and our 4 children live directly across the street from one of 2 locations that are proposed to be used as a medical facility. Our 4 children include twin girls who attend the nearby elementary school, a teenage daughter who is attending the local high school, and a young adult son who is severely intellectually disabled and who lives with us at home. Our son, who is a joy, is nonverbal, has the mind of a small child, and will require round-the-clock care for the rest of his life. When we purchased our home in Fairfield 7 years ago, we chose a home that we felt could keep our son and 3 daughters safe. It has always been our dream to find a home that we could leave to our son after we pass away, so he could stay in a familiar and meaningful place after we are no longer here. Our home in Fairfield was a stretch for us, and we used our life savings to purchase it. We found a home with a little bit of extra land that would enable us to establish a very small family farm which serves as our son's life vocational program. We opened our farm to children and adults with developmental and other disabilities. We work the farm ourselves and have devoted the last 7 years to building a home and farm for our children and the children and adults with disabilities who are part of our farm. Our greatest fear as parents has been what would happen to our son after we have passed away. We thought we had found a home that we could leave to our son and others with disabilities as a group home after we are no longer here to care for him. However, due to the Connecticut law that could prevent one group home from operating within 1,000 feet of another, it is likely that our son will not be able to live in our home as a group home if the proposed medical facility across the street is approved as a group home. We have been told that we should consider placing our son on a waiting list for a group home somewhere else in the event we pass away. We have been told that there are very few group homes available for adults with intellectual disabilities and autism. The waiting list is decades long, and the priority given to those who have lost is to those who have lost both elderly parents. So we are now coming to terms with the heart-wrenching reality that, like many other parents of adults with special needs, we are likely to die not knowing where our son will live or who will care for them after we are gone. We fully support greater access to medical facilities. We have friends who have lost loved ones to substance abuse and mental health issues, and our hearts go out to them. However, the proposed for-profit medical facilities should not be permitted under the guise of group homes. Medical treatment facilities can and do exist very effectively without group home status. The group home laws are being hijacked for financial gain in an attempt to obtain approval for proposed for-profit medical facilities for short-term patients in residential neighborhoods. A group home for my son would allow him to live a long, meaningful, and inclusive life in his residential neighborhood with the support and care of the community. Through years of community outreach and trust, group homes have become accepted and even welcomed into neighborhoods such as ours. Unfortunately, the ongoing attempts by proposed commercial medical treatment facilities to co-opt the group home laws for financial gain have jeopardized community goodwill and access to group homes at the expense of the most vulnerable members of our society, making it extremely difficult to address the extreme shortage of group homes for those with intellectual disabilities, autism, mental illness, and other lifelong disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. We'd be happy to field any questions, but before I close, I want to reiterate, Senate Bill 185 will be heard in public hearing today in the Housing Committee. We urge its passage out of the Housing Committee for us to continue the dialogue and conversation in clarifying the definition of group homes. What you have heard today from all the participants here today and many others that support 185 is loud and clear. We all fully are aware of the critical need for substance abuse and mental health services. We are all very protective of the legislative intent of Section 8-3E for the protected classes of group homes. But for me, the simplification is in three parts. One, is it at home? I don't think so, but I welcome the conversation. But ultimately, it's about creating the best model to be able to solve the critical crisis of addiction and mental health needs. And we don't believe that this is a model under this statute is the right way to go. But I welcome the opportunity to have more conversations, and I want to thank all of these individuals who are not lobbyists, who are not paid staffers. These are individuals that have taken time out of their days to believe in a passion. And I think it was Megan who said it very well. This is not the NIMBY that you think about. This is a NIMBY that says, now I must get involved. So thank you very much for being here. But it's Senate Bill 185 in the Housing Committee. Feel free to offer testimony if you like, but I would encourage passage and then a much more deeper dialogue on how to create the best model to address the needs and meet the needs of the people affected. Representative Devlin, Representative Farnen?
Thank you, Senator. You've done a great job of outlining everything.
Thank you very much for being here. Any questions?
How long has this been simmering in Fairfield?
I can answer to you this. It's a very interesting question, and I'll let the neighborhood speak about the timing. It's interesting you asked that question because for the last 2 years, I remember, this has been an issue that has been raised in the Planning and Development Committee. In fact, the proposal of a bill was to include medical treatment centers to codify that into 8-3E. I have always found that very interesting, that it was never codified and it was a loose interpretation. And if you truly look at the current language of 8-3E, It looks at a payer model that includes DEMIS, Medicaid, and an insurance model. Under this current proposal in Fairfield, that model does not exist. So it's fascinating you say that. So this has been an ongoing issue for the past 2 or 3 years in planning and development as relates to adding in medical treatment centers and codifying it into language. It seems somebody was paying attention to this, but nevertheless, this is one where, as I said before, this is a NIMBY where people felt an impact, felt a need to get involved, and I'll have a speaker from the Fairfield explain that.
Specifically on a local level, the dates that impact us directly by one corporation. The 2 homes, they're multi-million-dollar properties. They were purchased on January 3rd of 2019. The corporation applied to the Office of Health Strategy for a certificate of need based on their medical facility designation in March of 2019. And then they continued to apply to the zoning office in the town of Fairfield Building Department to obtain multiple permits for a change of use to a group home, despite the fact that they were notified by the state OHS that they were not indeed a group home and rather a medical facility. Designated as a mental health residential living center. It's a separate license by an entire separate licensing body of the Department of Public Health. We've been challenging and litigating the zoning aspect of it since last summer. I believe it was July that we had the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we're continuing straight through, obviously, into 2020 before all of you today. Any other questions?
I just want to let you know that this is not just a Fairfield problem. It's been going on in Maryland, and actually we were the ones that stopped it in Maryland. What they're doing is using it as an SRO, which is a single home occupancy, which has nothing to do with demons. And the way they did it in Maryland was they put 4 people to a bedroom, 650 a pop. They didn't stay that long. They were still drunkards and all that. And no, I'm not anti-recovery because I have almost 29 in this thing. And what our pre-emblem states is that we don't own anything. They divide us from our primary purpose. So they're doing it for monetary gain. And they don't meet the guidelines. So how we got rid of them is we use the fire department code because we only have so many people in the building. But we have, and Meriden is 55. So if you don't stop it now, I promise you'll be telling me later. So great job.
Thank you for your story. It's true. The major message of why we're so passionate about this is not a specific local problem. Every local town has their own zoning regulations. So there's different loopholes, different designations, and different abilities for people to apply for certain uses of different types of facilities. Once the residential zones are classified in certain areas, by assuming that they can qualify under a group home, they automatically shield themselves from any type of discrimination on residential living. What they forget to tell any zoning official is that these people will be leaving after 90 days. And in terms of a residential zone, that's a very different understanding of the meaning. And so we're very much aware that this is happening all over the state. By the way that the language is so obtuse in the legislation as it exists now, it's being abused, and it is to the detriment of the most protected class that we're trying to protect, which are people that need long-term residential protections based on their disability. So thank you for sharing your story.
It's not just a Fairfield issue. As you mentioned, it's a state issue, but it's also a federal issue. Organizations are using the federal intention of protecting groups that we fully support to engage. I think the letter you just heard read is an example of people with loving intention trying to create independent living dynamics for their loved ones. And unfortunately, this loophole allows organizations to take advantage of it, bypassing the intended purpose for federal and state protection. And it will hurt the very population that we are here to support.